Hi, this is Gina Nelson from the College Counseling Center, and I put this little video together really quickly for you today to try to help some faculty and staff who are worried about their students and unsure how to help them right now. It may seem obvious why we're all so overwhelmed, but this is a really unique situation, so let's just talk about that for a sec. We had very little mental preparation. We could see this happening across the world and getting closer, but it still happened very fast and there was a lot to do in a short amount of time. So we had to go into crisis mode really fast. That creates a lot of anxiety. That was positive anxiety at the time, believe it or not, because it got all the chemicals, adrenaline, and energy flowing that we needed to make things happen very quickly. But that adrenaline and those chemicals are still flowing through our brains and we're in reactionary mode. And a long period of time with that happening is really not healthy for us. So think of people you know or yourself. If you have an anxiety disorder, your body is really living in fight or flight mode at all times. And that's supposed to help us through a specific short-term period of time. It's not meant to sustain us long-term, but that's what a lot of us are experiencing right now. And the adrenaline just needs to slow down, and we need to make that happen purposefully because of the crisis around us. It's not happening as naturally. And so focusing on breathing, exercise, fresh air, stepping away from work, things like that, will help us to get out of that mode. I'll talk about that in a minute. Because this is new for us, most of us didn't go through the 1918 flu epidemic. We have a greater sense of helplessness because we don't know what to expect. We have a sense by watching other countries, and that's really frightening. And we know that we can't stop this from happening around us, and that creates a greater sense of helplessness. Also, our students are really struggling in very different ways that we're used to. They're usually with us, and while hopefully the people from really abusive and terrible households are still with us on campus, some people are at home, and hopefully they're not abusive situations, but they might not be the best situations, their favorite, their safest, their most happy situations. And so they're struggling with that on top of their academics, and we can't help them with that. That feels even more helpless for us. Some people don't do well with online learning. It's really not their forte. Some of us, it's not our forte for teaching, and we can't help them with that either. We can try to make adjustments, but they need to figure it out. And that's kind of a harsh reality right now, and we feel helpless because it's the only reality. Also, we just don't have any answers about the future. We can always hope about what's happening in the future, and that's definitely the healthiest place to live, but we also are realistic that this is a terrible crisis. We don't know what the other side of it's going to look like. We don't know what it's going to look like when we're enmeshed up here in the North Country like they are in the city or in other countries. We're waiting for those answers as well, and we'll only know when it happens. And so we can't prepare ourselves, let alone our students. And because of all this, it's harder to soothe others. It's definitely easier to focus on other people when we're struggling. And I think that's what a lot of us who are caregivers are doing, including yourselves as faculty and staff. But since we don't have ways to help them, we feel even more helpless, and it forces us to focus on our own fears and our own emotions. And that's not a place that we really like to live. So what support is available for students both on campus and at home? Certainly we're hearing about a lot of resources for the students on campus because Res Life has been amazing with keeping things really organized and purposeful for those students, whether it's food delivery, availability of items, quarantine situations. You know, Tracy in Student Health and Julie in Residence Life, they're on it. They're figuring it out minute to minute. And while it's not an easy place to live on campus right now, there's direction. For our students off campus, it's really uncertain. They're in their homes, but they're still learning. They've had to blend two worlds. They've had to put on a lot of hats, just like we have, when they really didn't expect to, and there's a lot of grief around that. So know that all of the campus services are still available. They just look different. So counseling, for example, because of course I'm focused on mental health, we're still seeing clients, we're still taking new students as clients, we're still doing telepsychiatry through SUNY Upstate, we're still prescribing medication to students, starting students on medication, following students on medication. We're doing everything that we always did. We're just doing it digitally. So have students make appointments. Emailing at counseling@potsdam.edu is the absolute fastest way to reach us. Our amazing secretary, Ellie, is monitoring that constantly throughout the day. That's one of her biggest roles, is to keep an eye on that and responds to people as soon as possible and gets them in the schedule. Because of this transition, we've got about 50% of our original clients who are still working with us right now, and so that means there's more space right now. We've gone up from 20% to 50% in a week, and I'm sure that that will continue to increase, but at least for right now this week, there are spots the next day, and so you encourage people because they don't have to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get in. We've also created some social media that we wouldn't normally have. We've created it because of this crisis as a way to try to reach students where they live in the digital world. So you yourself and encourage students to join the Facebook page if you're on social media, to join Instagram. We've got a couple counselors in charge of that specifically. They're adding videos, posts, tips, websites, and a couple of our therapy dogs now have their own pages. Some of our students are saying they miss Gibbs and Winston and Richard. And so Richard and Winston right now have their own Facebook pages, and sometimes just seeing those familiar dogs for some of our ongoing clients has been really helpful. Use Navigate through Student Success Center. The link is there. Sean is still monitoring that, of course. If you're not sure what kind of support a student needs, if there's academic and mental health or other types of concerns, that's a good place to start a report because that gets sent out to different people on campus. Sean's still monitoring that and his team are, so use that link, start a case. Very similar is the Care Enough to Call, which is been around for a number of years, but probably not advertised as much as we had originally hoped. That goes to Eric Dushare, the Dean of Students. If you email, you can put information about a student there. And again, there's a group of us, the BEC, the Behavioral Evaluation Committee. Usually they're called BIT teams, BET teams, student concern teams. We have directors, deans, assistant deans, and again, Eric will disseminate that information to whom he thinks is appropriate. Very similar to Navigate. My biggest advice on this is we do need to know these student names. It's so amazing that faculty and staff want to ensure privacy of these situations. But if you're reaching out to us, to Navigate, to Care Enough to Call, to counseling, it's because you're worried about a student and you're looking for some advice and some support. And so telling us who the student is not betraying their privacy at all. It's helping them, because if, for example, you're emailing me about a student, I might know that they're a client at the counseling center, but I certainly cannot share that or even give an indication that they are. And so while you're emailing, I'm looking them up. I'm looking to see when they last saw their counselor. I'm looking to see if they're connected with EOP, with Bridges, with a specific faculty on campus of support. And so without that name, I can only give generic advice, and that's less helpful to you. So help us help you by giving us those student names. So we feel helpless as what to say, how to advise students. Here are a few tips. I'm sure you're doing other things. have other advice, and I hope that you'll share that with people. We're really back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, the basics, safety. Some students need to focus on safety. We need to focus on health, drinking, eating, sunlight, air. And so, as simple as it might sound to some of us, our students don't necessarily think about these things. They need to make sure they're eating. They need to make sure they're drinking water. They need to get some form of exercise. Some of our students are severely depressed. Sometimes I'm telling them getting out of bed and stretching, if they're able to take a shower, that's their exercise. We sometimes need to lower our expectations about what that looks like for some of our students and for ourselves. There's not a lot of sun up here in the North Country, but talking to some of the students that are in other places of the state, there is. And so encouraging them to get out in the sun if possible, but also remembering some of our students in some urban areas do not live in safe places. Stepping outside onto the porch is not a safe option because of their neighborhood. And so just being realistic and asking them, what kind of area are you in? Is it realistic to go outside and take a breath of fresh air, or isn't it? So some specifics: keeping the blinds open even when it's cloudy creates more light. Sitting in a room with the blinds closed is very depressing and discourages us from moving and being active. Keeping water nearby so that we'll remember to drink. Out of sight, out of mind. If you don't have it near you, you might think about it, but you might not get up to get it because something else interferes, or you're too tired, or you just don't feel like it. So keeping your water next to you is something that's simple that they could do. Creating a workspace for themselves that's not on their bed. As we've learned as adults, beds are for sleeping and for sex, and they should remain that way. If we use those as workspaces, then we're not in the right mode. We're not as active as we want to be, and we're not even creating that short commute from our bed across the room to a table or the floor. That's equally important for students to realize that bed is not going to be a productive place to work, even though it might be the most comfortable. I'd like to start changing the language. I saw this in an article about changing from social distancing, which is the buzzword, to physical distancing. We're actually discouraging social distancing. We're encouraging everybody to remain as social as possible digitally. And we're encouraging people to stay apart physically. And so if we can start changing that one little semantic, I think that could add some hope. And just encourage people to remain as social as possible. Of course, we want to limit our news. This really takes me back to 9/11. For some people, the Kennedy assassination, of course, that was not in the digital world, and 9/11 wasn't as much in the digital world as this is. But at 9/11, I was an RD on campus, and we were walking around encouraging people to shut off the news. It's just the same negative message over and over, and the same helpless feeling, the same fear. And we need to get our information, but then we need to walk away, because the overall picture of this is not going to end anytime in the very, very near future. And we know that. So why continue to watch the same stories? Because they're terrifying. So walking away from the news and walking away from social media that focuses on COVID. Sometimes leaving some of the groups that have been created with the intention of helping. There are different community groups for COVID all around the country and the world. Choosing which ones really give you what you need, support, information, community, and walking away from the ones with the negative comments is really a healthy thing to consider. Creating a physical list of some kind, handwritten on your phone, bookmarks, of places to go when you feel yourself getting into that digital spiral of just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and not really paying attention anymore. Documentaries, concerts, animal videos, audiobooks, something that's easily accessible to remind you this isn't where I want to be digitally right now. So what do we do when students are in crisis? And of course, we're getting that through email or phone call or Zoom video or text or some digital means. So it feels even more removed than when someone would walk into our office and report they're in crisis, and we could at least talk to them. What do we do with such students? You can see that down below, this is my signature for my email. The tribal support link is getting cut off by the video, but you can still click on it and get there. Consider using something like this. Feel free to copy and paste this directly. If you have other areas of support, please add them and let me know too, so that we can add them to our emails and our websites. Create a spot in your Moodle class just for resources. Add things that are helpful for you. Add this whole video, even though it's focused for faculty and staff. Create a video of your own. Add pieces, steal pieces from other PowerPoints, from websites. Don't recreate the wheel. There's a lot of information out there right now. Encouraging people to use one of these places to reach out, or any local crisis centers. And also encouraging them to call. Don't walk into their local crisis center, their local hospital. They need to call and be honest about how they're feeling. If they're having thoughts of suicide, they can't resist. If they're hearing or seeing things, having hallucinations, having delusions, voices that they're hearing they know are not theirs, having really strong, irresistible urges to cut themselves severely, those are reasons to call the local hospital, the emergency crisis center in their area. If they're on campus or local, definitely calling university police is the fastest way, because they will call one of us 24/7 to reach out to that student. Taking care of ourselves. This is all about students, right? All this stuff is for ourselves. We should be doing all of these things, and we should be role modeling them. That's a lot easier said than done when we're in the middle of a crisis like this, but things like keeping your water bottle visible when you do Zoom classrooms and drinking from it during class, taking 2 minutes to do a deep breathing exercise or a stretch or jumping jacks before you start your class. For anyone able and interested, you don't want to make anything mandatory, because we don't always know the physical abilities and mental abilities of anyone in our classes. Also at this time, if you haven't heard, we can't usually work with faculty and staff. It's beyond our scope of practice, and we're not usually covered with liability because we're there for students. But things are really relaxed right now because of this crisis, and we want to reach out to all of you and help you. If you're interested in having a one-time free session with me or any of our counselors, just email me directly and we'll get that set up. We do have on our website a list of off-campus providers, and recently Blair Mador put my updated list of off-campus providers in the Faculty Senate notes from the last meeting in March. You can look at that too. I have a private practice. I know other people around us have private practices, so my information's on there. For example, as someone you might know or recognize, that might be comfortable, that might be less comfortable, but please feel free to use any of the resources on that site. We also have some insurance information with all those providers on that PDF. Also, if you're interested in having a counselor talk with your entire staff, or there's a group of you, whether you work together or you're across campus that are struggling, feel similarly, and just want to talk as a group, we can do that. We can set that up. So email me directly and we'll definitely work with you. And this is another great way to role model self-care. You could tell your students that you're taking advantage of some of these resources too. So here are some places to start, just a few quick websites that I threw together. The CDC is the best place to be getting updated information about COVID. It can give you what you need to know for the day because it's changing so fast without dragging you into all the different stories like CBS or NBC or CNN might. You can get your information. If you hear rumors, you can go to the CDC and learn what's true. The Managing Stress and Anxiety is also from the CDC website regarding COVID specifically, and I think that's a really good place to start to learn some tips if you want more information. The San Diego Zoo live cams is for fun, and I encourage students and you to check that out if you've been seeing any of these videos on your news feeds, seeing the different animals roaming around the zoo and seeing some of their fellow animals, since the zoos are pretty empty, is really hilarious and very touching. And then I just put a yoga YouTube up because it's mostly an idea. There are so many YouTube videos. That's mostly what our students do these days, is watch videos. Why not use that medium to help us stay healthy? This was just a really quick overview. I hope that it was helpful. If you want more information, you need support, please email me directly. That's what I'm here for, and it helps me to help other people as well. Make this a great day.